we're going to do is we're moving on to the next chapter, chapter 3, and we're identifying pairs of lines and angles. Most of this chapter is going to be some of the things that we learned in algebra, but we're also going to introduce some new things, some new definitions. And one of the first ones that we're going to look at today is the word transversal. And what a transversal is, it's a line that intersects two coplanar lines at two distinct points. Coplanar, again, means that the lines are on the same plane. So if I were looking in my room, it'd be two lines on the floor, or two lines on the ceiling, or two lines that are on my wall, but they are on the same plane. And the transversal in this picture is that pink line. Notice that it is intersecting line M and line N in 2 points. One is there and one is there. And that is a transversal. So it's going to cut two lines, line M and line N, and the lines need to be coplanar. Now, there are some more words that we're going to look at today. One of the words is interior angles. So if you think interior, the word that we're going to be looking at is in, like inside. So if I take a look at this picture, and I think of this as like two Oreo cookies, the angles that are inside of that Oreo cookie would be angles 3 and 4 and angles 5 and 6. They're inside. Think of it like a sandwich. So when we say interior angles, we would say angle 3, angle 4, angle 5, and angle 6. Notice that I put the little angle symbol, I put the number, and then I put commas between it. So those are our interior angles. Now, again, if I look at my sandwich, here's my sandwich, and I know my interior angles are inside, exterior angles are outside. And so if I take a look at this again, if they're not interior, they're exterior or outside. And so my exterior angles would be angle 1, comma, angle 2, comma, angle 7, comma, and angle 8. So again, interior, inside my sandwich, exterior, on the outside of my sandwich. Now that we have those, we're going to take a look at corresponding angles, alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and consecutive interior angles. I think what I'm going to do first is let's look at alternate interior angles. So we're going to look at these first, okay? And I'm going to look at this one right here. We'll look at the other one later. I'm going to look at my two lines and my transversal. Well, if you take a look at this, line A and line B are my two lines on the plane, and then my transversal, which I'm going to make pink, is going to be right here. So now I'm looking at inside my sandwich. Again, inside my sandwich, I've got A as the top bread, B as the bottom bread, and I'm looking at 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Those are my interior angles. Now, notice that the definition says alternate interior angles. So what alternate means is that they are on opposite sides of the transversal. So for example, if I've got 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, they're my interior angles, then alternate would be 3 and 6, because they're on opposite sides. They're not next to each other either. We don't want them next to each other. We want them on opposite sides of the transversal and kind of like kitty corner from each other. So angle 3 and angle 6 are one pair, and they go in pairs. And then the other pair would be 3 and 4. So angle 3 and angle 4 and angle 5. So again, they're interior angles and they're on the other side of the transversal. So they're crisscross from each other, shall we say. Those are alternate interior angles. Now let's look at the exterior angles. Again, this is my sandwich, and if I look at the outside, I've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 7 and 8. Now I'm doing alternate exterior. So I'm going down to this next definition, alternate exterior. Okay, I'm going to take a look at the same type of idea. They're kind of crisscross from each other. So it'd be 1 and 8. So angle 1 and angle 8. And then the other two would be angle 2 and angle 7. So they're exterior and they're alternate. So they're like crisscross from each other. All right. Now that we've established that, let's take a look at consecutive interior. Now, again, we're looking at interior angles, but they're not alternate interior. So again, let's take a look at these. If I take a look at the interior, so 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, they're interior. Consecutive interior, I think of as like roommates. They're on the same side of the transversal. So for example, I think of 3 and 5. They're next to each other in the transversal. And I think of this as like kind of a little room. They're like roommates. So angle 3 and angle 5. And then on the other side, again, I'm looking at the interior, would be 4 and 6. Those would be the others. So again, they're on the same side as the transversal and they're inside. All right. Now the last one that we're going to take a look at is called corresponding. So you'll notice it's not interior or exterior, it's corresponding. And so what those are, let's say I look at angle 1. Notice it's the upper left-hand corner on the 4 top angles. So I look at the bottom 4 angles and it's the top left one. So 1 and 5. That's a set of corresponding. Now I'm going to go back. Upper right-hand corner is 2. Is 2. So the other upper right-hand corner in the bottom angles is 6. So 2 and 6. Now I go back. Lower left-hand corner would be 3, and the other lower left-hand corner of the bottom 4 is 7. So 3 and 7. And then finally, lower right-hand corner is 4. Lower right-hand corner would be 8. So angle 4 and angle 8. And those are the corresponding alternate exterior, alternate interior, and consecutive interior. Now, let's take a look at this next group. And let's just talk a little bit. Again, let's go with alternate interior. So I've got my Oreo cookie. So here's my cookie. Interior angles are 11, 12, 13, and 14. Those are our interior. If we're doing alternate interior, it would be 11 and 14. And the other alternate interior would be 12 and 13. Notice that they're like crisscross from each other. If I'm doing alternate exterior, if I pick 9 then it would be 16. The other alternate exterior is 10 and 15. Again, they're exterior and they're opposites from each other. Now let's move on and let's do consecutive interior. So they're inside again. So I'm looking at these 4 that are inside and they're on the same side. So angle 11 and angle 13 is one pair, and angle 12 and angle 14 are the other pair. So there's 2 sets. Finally, if we take a look at corresponding with 9 would be angle 13. Notice that there's 4 angles here and 4 angles here. That's what I'm kind of comparing. Okay, if I pick angle 10, angle 14. If I pick angle 11, I pick angle 15. And finally, angle 12 and angle 16. Really important that you know all 4 of those definitions because we will be using them in proofs. Also note that there is an angles pair quiz in Schoology and everyone needs to get 100% on that quiz. So when we're done with notes, you might want to work on that a little bit before you do your assignment. Otherwise, work on your assignment, but between now and the test, everyone needs to get 100% on that quiz. If you have questions, make sure that you ask me. Finally, let's take a look at some other things. Parallel lines. Parallel lines are lines in a plane that never intersect, kind of like a railroad track. Sometimes we see in a picture, they're depicted by like little arrows. So they won't say these lines are parallel. They'll put little symbols like that. The symbol for parallel lines, like I'll do, let's say I have line AB is parallel, and you'll notice they're nice, tall, and straight, to line CD. So we can call, let's say, this line AB and this one C and D. And it's depicted or denoted by those little arrows that they're parallel. Another definition that we're going to use this chapter is perpendicular. They're lines that intersect to form right angles. A lot of kids will say they intersect to form like a T or an X, but specifically it's that right angle. And you're going to know it's a right angle because, like we said before, it has that little square thing there. So again, I could say that I have line AB, and then to do perpendicular, the symbol is an upside down capitalized T. And we could say is perpendicular to CD. And so if I come over here, I could say that this is AB and this is CD. So it's kind of what they look like. Now let's take a look at something called skew. Now, we've seen parallel before. We've seen perpendicular before. Skew are a little different. They're lines in 3D. They never intersect and they aren't coplanar. So let's talk about that for just a minute. If I take a look at this picture, I can take a look at line AE. Okay? And I can take a look at line FB. If I continued those lines, they would never touch. But these are not skew lines. These lines are actually parallel. So line AE would be parallel to line BF. They're actually parallel. What makes something skew is they're not going to touch, but they're not parallel either. So an example of a skew line would be line AE is skewed with line, and there's no fancy like symbol when we have parallel and perpendicular. So we actually say that they're not skewed. So an example would be DC. Okay, DC runs on the bottom, AE runs on the top. They'll keep going, they would never touch. So this would be DC. Or another line that we could say is skewed with AE, and that would be FH. Another line that could be skewed with AE would be BC. So it's three-dimensional. They're never going to touch, but again, they're not, parallel either. So you have to be a little careful with that. Another thing to be careful of is some students will say AE right here is parallel or is skew with HC. They actually are not skewed. They're parallel. If I took a sheet of paper and started at AE and cut through the box to CH, that's actually parallel. And so you need to make sure that the lines that are skewed are not going the same direction, like they're not going right at you. They would go, like for example, if I did EF, okay, an example of a skew line would be CH. They're not going the same direction. Okay, another example would be HD. They're not going in the same direction. So they're not going left and right. They're going back and forth or up and down. So they go in different directions. That is it for this chapter. Make sure that you check the assignment, and when you're doing your assignment, check your answers. If you have any questions, please let me know. Also remember there is that angle quiz that's in Schoology. Make sure that you work on that and that we're trying to get 100% by the time you take your test.